Back to me too.
That's awesome. We're good. All right. Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this regular meeting of the Town of Griswold Board of Finance to order July 16th, 2024 at 7 p.m. in the Town Hall Meeting Room. First item on the agenda is the roll call to order.
We have all members present.
Okay, second item on the agenda, public forum. Does anyone wish to speak? Anyone wish to speak? Anyone wish to speak? Moving on to item 3, approval of minutes. June 18th, 2024 regular meeting minutes.
Motion to approve minutes. Second.
Okay, we have a first and second. Any discussion? Here now we're going to vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 4, new business, Finance Director's monthly report.
All right, I give you the revenue and expenditure reports for FY 23-24. I didn't bother with the current year yet because we've really just begun, so not gonna be too helpful to you. But going off last year's reports, right now revenues recorded to date, we're at $40,191,916.51. That is 99.4% of budgeted revenues. I'm projecting we're gonna end the year around 670,000 over budgeted revenues. Therefore, we'll only have to use 180,000 of the surplus to cover the revenues. So, interest income came on really strong. Still, the rates have stayed high, so that's why it's been a good year. Better than expected the last few months. Expenditures, right now, we're at $39,519,584.84. That is 97.74% of budget expenditures. I anticipate we'll be around 380,000 under budget for expenditures. So between the two, we're in pretty good shape where we're actually gonna, hopefully, once the final numbers come in, actually increased our surplus by about 200,000 as opposed to taking out 850. So fiscally, we looked very strong last year. Items currently over budget, I listed what we have. I was gonna do transfers this month, but I wanna wait because there's still a few bills I'm waiting for to come in to have all the transfers ready. As far as fund balance right now, I'm anticipating at the end of the year, we're gonna be a little over 20%. Right now, it looks like as a percentage of the current year budget, around 20.03%, which is 437,877 over our max. So one of the big reasons, other than increasing our revenues, well, our strong revenues and our expenses being under, is like last year, if you look, we used $850,000 out of surplus. For the current budget, we didn't use any. So what happens is, suppose we had 8 million in total fund balance, 850,000 of that last year went to assigned because it's assigned for the next year. So our unassigned would have been 7,150,000. This year, we don't have that, so almost all of our fund balance is unassigned. We'll just have a little bit for encumbrances, but not too much. So that's a big reason why we're in better shape fund balance wise for unassigned fund balance. So once we get the final numbers, my recommendation is probably gonna be next year, come budget time, try and take that excess and add that to our capital, kind of either do more road work or purchase some bigger pieces of equipment that we've been needing. If anyone has any questions, I will be happy to try and answer.
Are you confident that by next month we'll be doing quarterly transfers to kind of close out?
Yeah, there's only a few bills I'm waiting for to finalize them.
Okay, and audit is done, correct? Audit's done, submitted,
Right.
approved, accepted.
Yeah, everything's done with that, and now we're gonna be on to the next year.
Okay, and we're gonna be look to have hopefully King and King come in and do a presentation for us at next month's meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, and where are we as far as being on track for,
Right now, I've gone through general fund through May. We've talked about a lot of the differences. We have to get together for some of the more recent ones, but things are pretty close. She gave me access to their Google Docs drive last week, so I've started looking at some of the other funds. So we're gonna be in good shape, I think, as far as being ready for when the auditors come on next.
when do you hopefully anticipate having everything wrapped up so that the auditors can come out?
I'm still shooting for the end of August to have everything done.
Okay, all right,
There may
everybody,
be a few
everybody's,
lingering things.
everybody's pretty
but
confident with that across the board, okay. Gary?
Yeah, I just wanna make a note because, you know, at the end of the budget season last year, we were in a perfect storm for a disaster. And it sounded so detrimental that we were gonna be in deficit and it was gonna be disastrous. And it's totally turned around. The basic reasons are,
The biggest thing is our revenues were so strong. We had
didn't, what I'm trying to say is the anticipation, our anticipation was it was gonna be a disaster. So
well, our mill rate did go up almost 1.5 mils.
right, well.
So to some people, that's a
So,
disaster.
so what I'm saying is that we went up 1.5 mils, but
Yeah.
we didn't anticipate the revenue, so now we're gonna be over our maximum for our fund balance. That's what
Now
I'm,
next year, we're not gonna have a cliff.
that's what I'm, as a member of the Board of Finance, trying to figure out, okay, so we thought it was gonna fall off the cliff. It didn't fall off the cliff. We didn't use any fund balance. Now we're over the fund balance. So I'm, as a Board of Finance member representing, I'd like to, I know it's not easy for you or anybody to anticipate where we or what could have happened, I guess, if we didn't have, or we did have this increase in revenue. Because it didn't happen and now we're we're gonna be over our fund balance max. That's just my observation on what happened in the past year.
But if we didn't have the sale of the alternative school, that was 200,000. We had tuition revenue that was about 300,000 over. We had interest income, which was about 300,000 over. So, I mean,
Well-
these are things that are not normally gonna happen.
I guess, like, the interest income, can that be anticipated?
I increased it quite a bit in the next budget.
Okay. That's what I'm just trying to see, if this is some anticipation,
But I mean-
we can know for sure, I know
If we
it's
look
just
back at-
change, I know that. I'm just trying to say, okay, we can anticipate this income or for sure, or we can't anticipate this income.
If we look back at when we did the budget, not this year, the prior year, I don't think anyone anticipated interest income staying, or interest rates stay so high. But they
Well,
have.
Well, I would say that if you watch the Fed, they said that it wouldn't go down for quite a long
They
time. The next time
expected
it's
3
gonna be
rate decreases.
September,
They expected 3 or 4 rate decreases and they haven't had any.
because the
Well,
economy.
I'm talking going back to when we did the budget.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's fine.
And in addition, it's important to note that, prudent accounting, we don't overstate our revenues. We take a conservative approach
No,
to
I'm
ensure
not-
that
I'm
our
not trying to
revenues are
say
not being
overstate.
overstated, nor are our expenses being understated. And I think that part of us dealing with the fiscal cliff really had to do with how we were able to put this year's budget together, which incorporated was a 1.36 mil increase to account for, for those money to plug that revenue hole. I hear you, Gary. I agree with you 100%. And I think that it's very important to recognize that most of these revenues that were recognized or realized, in the realm of accounting were one-time events or should be kind of considered one-time events. We don't sell a school every year. We don't have interest income, that high every year, that these are really just one-time events that were difficult, if not impossible, to be able to plan for. And moving forward, as Eric said, like we look to increase capital and knock a few things off that list, moving into next year, accordingly. And just before we kind of want to move on, I do want to just, kind of take a moment and, recognize, thank, both, Eric and Deb Martin from the schools. Because, you're reporting, you're thinking by August, which in my mind really puts us back on a normal fiscal schedule at this point. So, with the two of you, there has been a dramatic, a dramatic turnaround, and I want to, thank you both for doing whatever was necessary to make that happen. It was crucial that we're able to kind of go in that direction, and I'm pretty happy with that.
Chairman,
Yeah.
I would like to also indicate that, and echo your thanks, because I know it was difficult. I know there were some stressful moments there in recreating a communication network. But what Gary said and also what was mentioned before, the sound accounting principles, the sound accounting, you don't overstate your revenues you don't even state them with rose-colored glasses, and you're honest about your expenses. And thank you both for your work, because we're moving out of the perfect storm now so that we can do what we need to do for the taxpayers.
Anyone else? Okay, so we're gonna move on to 4B, discussion of possible action on funding protective glass and techs assessor offices.
This was something that the board of selectmen discussed, something they thought was pretty important, just with everything going on nowadays. You can never be too safe, especially with tax office, especially when you have a mill rate increase. They felt it was prudent to look into putting some protective glass along the counter for the tax office and the assessor's office. Martin worked with a company to get a quote. I included it in your packet. This is for the glass to go from basically the tax desk all the way through the assessor's desk, the length of both offices. I don't know if Tina wants to talk more on what they discussed.
No, Martin did quite a bit of research. He talked to a number of people. This was the estimate that he came up with, and I fully support it. I think it's important. We've had some occurrences here in town, and I know that in talking with the tax collector, the ladies there, they're hopeful that we can make this happen.
Occurrences? Did you say?
Well, you had 2 bank robberies across the street.
Have we had any problems here?
We've had irate people come in, upset about their taxes and upset about what their taxes are covering. And I've only heard a few of the stories, but this has been something that the tax collector has indicated she has tried for quite a few years to make happen. So I thought we would bring it forward. With the amount of money that's being collected in that office, I think it's a very good safety to have in place.
Matt, your question?
Is this the only quote we received? Written quote?
That's the one he submitted.
So we have no other quotes that we know of?
I don't know if he had others. That was what he submitted to the board. So that was what we passed on to Eric.
I'd like to see at least one more quote, Mr. Chairman, you know, around the idea of doing our due diligence, make sure we are in the area with the quote.
So how's everybody else feel about that?
Um, I, I understand that we should get a second quote, but I think that, if we have a consensus tonight, that we should, approve the project up to a certain amount. Providing that Board of Selectmen get a second quote and they make the selection of who they wanna go with.
Include that in the motion, that will approve up to a certain amount, but it's contingent upon them
Right.
getting a
Second quote. I think the second quote keeps everybody working hard and looking forward, so.
Do we have guidelines on dollar amount versus number of quotes?
$7,500 is supposed to go out to bid. That's our bid level.
I get, Mr. Chairman, I understand what you said about, tax collector wanting to do this for years, but I have not heard of any kind of like threats of like fist fighting bullets or anything like that in the town hall. If I did, I haven't heard of it since I've been here. So I guess I'm a little surprised about this. I have not heard about this. I have not seen or heard any complaints from Leona or anyone about any kind of physical abuse and I myself, I'm not sure about this.
I understand how you feel, but I think what we're trying to avoid is waiting to hear for something like that to happen. And it is always, and I know even, when Leona's assistant, Ariel, when she's going to school, she will tell you that we are one of the, there are many town halls and many tax offices that offer this protection with that amount of money. I personally feel that we don't want to wait until something happens. I'd rather be proactive than reactive.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I've been to several town halls, and they do have, these shields, and being sort of a Pollyanna on some days, I think that maybe it's because of COVID and the spread of flu and other germs and whatnot, which I'm sure comes into it and is a benefit, but yeah, this violence, we don't think it's gonna hit us, but it could. And these are our employees. We should do something like this to keep them safe.
So Eric, with a $7,500 threshold for bid, and we've had some talk about looking at getting another quote to make sure that we're getting, good honest numbers, and putting forth a motion that would require another quote, but putting a ceiling on that number. I was part of an email thread from Martin where he had sort of requested after the fact that we consider increasing that dollar amount for, contingencies in the event that there needed to be some additional, trim work or construction work to that, I guess, that counter area after that was installed. I would, I guess, make an assumption that work could be done by Public Works. Am I correct in that thought assumption? Would it have to be done by the outside? Because I guess my next question, the reason why I asked that, Todd, is my next question is whether or not, if we were going to do an appropriation, if we would do an appropriation with a maximum amount of 74.99 to account for any materials that might need to be purchased, in the event that came through. And I think, his thought was, we're gonna pull this project off, and then all of a sudden, maybe we're left with all of this unfinished, framing or work around it. Let's get it all done at the same time. Which makes sense, but I guess I'll put the ball in your court. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'd have to see what it entails. I don't even know what they're looking at currently.
Right.
I assume what they're talking about is gonna be installed by the glass company, but
Right, and I think his thought was just, you know, if anything needed to be done
we could probably.
after
do
that.
it. I guess we could probably. do it.
Okay.
Ready?
So I guess we have a couple of different thought processes on the floor. Does anybody else have anything that they wanna add before I say, okay, somebody make a motion and we can vote on it accordingly? Eric?
I'm gonna need guidance on where we're gonna pay for it from.
Okay, any suggestions?
My first thought was we have LoSiP money, $35,000. This project would be considered that, we have that put aside in our capital non-recurring fund. But then the more I thought about it, we did increase building repair money. We could take it out of there for now, and if later on in the year we had other things happen, we could say, you know what, instead of paying for it out of there, let's move it over to capital non-recurring and expend it out of LoSiP funds.
That transfer would be permissible.
Yeah.
So the building repair, do you have a line item number?
Yes, $20,000 we have in it.
But what's the line item number? Is there a number that,
Yeah. I'd have to look
that
at
you
what it
would
is.
need us
I
to?
believe it's 5234. Department is 1801. But we won't be doing a transfer or anything right now. You're
Okay.
just gonna tell us, okay, you can do it, you can spend it out of this line item.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we authorize this tempered glass project with a budget up to $7,400, that it be paid from the building repair line item, Department 1801. The authorization is contingent on the Board of Selectmen getting a second quote. And then they are authorized to move forward with the selection of whichever vendor they choose to go with.
That'd be a second written quote.
Second written quote.
Okay, we have a first, do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion?
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I believe it would be premature on our part right now to put a motion forward, only because if we're concerned about the safety, then putting 3/8 glass is not gonna stop a bullet. So then what's gonna happen is they're gonna come back to us and want to make it bulletproof, which is an additional $25,000. That would be a quoted, so we're giving them authorization to go forward pending another quote, only to have them come back to us and say, we need another 25,000. So I think we should hold off until we get the quotes, then we can make a decision, have them make a decision on which way they wanna go, and then go from there. But leaving an open door, I think just opens us up to,
So is your fear that the next quote that we receive is gonna be for $25,000?
well, my fear is that we're gonna authorize them to go through with it, and then it's gonna come back and say, well, we want it to be bulletproof. And now we're gonna be in a place where we're gonna pretty much have to go forward and authorize $25,000 for bulletproof glass.
Okay. I'm gonna actually turn it over to the first selectman, since they handled this. They came up with the idea and with the dollar amount and how they were gonna proceed. So if you could shed some light on that and perhaps those concerns, Tina?
I did in fact come up with the idea. And then Martin McKinney agreed to do the research, like work on the estimates, the information. At the last Board of Selectmen meeting, he passed out the quote that you have in your hands. And I knew that it was a lower figure, with 3/4 inch glass on me. And then it was also the bulletproof for 25,000. He felt very strongly that the lower would be at least a sufficient deterrent. And then there was conversation, and I don't know, Eric, if you were in on this, if you remember this, about, I think at the school, there's a film that goes over the glass that prevents shattering. Now, I don't know if he's researched that any further, but I certainly could ask him to. But he, and I think both he and Rich were confident that the lower 3/4 inch would be the way that we should go right
Was this a unanimous vote by your board to proceed in this direction as opposed to going with the higher dollar
Yes.
option? And so you were all, it's safe to say that the three of you were comfortable with this approach?
I was comfortable with the research that, and
Okay.
and the conversation that he had.
Okay, and were there any conversations, I guess, because this says tax/assessor offices, so I'm gonna guess it's gonna go all the way down and cover that whole area. Was there any conversation with either the assessor side or the tax collector side of this approach?
I think there was an agreement that it should run the entire.
Okay, but as far as the selection, did they have any input or were they comfortable with what there
I
was
know
or?
Martin did talk with Leona.
Mhm.
And I think that Leona was comfortable with it.
Okay.
And I think the general consensus down the line was.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
yes, sir.
so the idea is not to stop bullets or a handgun or anything like that, just to stop somebody from jumping over or taking a hammer or, I mean, that's, I guess, what I'm gonna go with. It's not gonna stop bullets. So what you're looking for is to stop
Aggression.
aggression.
If somebody were to pull out a gun, at least it gives the employees an opportunity to, I guess there's a button, is there a button under the counter? There is a button under the counter to at least duck, push the button. It gives them an extra layer of safety other than somebody just walking up to the counter and putting something in their face, whether it be a knife, a gun, a hammer, a fist. It can also hopefully act as a deterrent. Because right now, they're wide open, so if you've got somebody walking the street and they're, you know, they see people are in here paying their bills, that's an easy target. And I forget, what did Leona say in tax collection? I mean, you know, she says she's handling a lot of money.
Yeah, tax collections are about 23 million.
Any other questions or discussion on this? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, motion, a first and a second. To authorize the maximum of $7,400 from the building maintenance line item from, what is it, Department 1801? Did I remember that correctly? For option, I'll call it option one, which is the non-bulletproof glass. If we have no further discussion, then we're going to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Is that three? Who's in favor? I didn't. That is 4. Any opposed? Or 2, that motion carries.
I just want on the record, I'm only opposing because of the fact that we don't have a second bid and we don't know exactly what we're getting into.
But it was contingent on,
And it was
Yeah.
contingent on that bid. I left that actually out as I reiterated before we voted. It was.
but that was,
But I mean, contingent on they can go out and get them. So,
I hear you.
definitely not opposed to the idea.
All right, 4C, discussion and possible action on appointment of auditor.
So with our next audit, this year was the last year on our contract. But we could not go out to bid early in the spring like we typically would because our audits still aren't complete. And with the findings that we had and how late our previous audit was, it would not have been a good result. So the hope was we would work with King and King for another year, then next spring go out for our bid. King and King is willing to do it. There will be a significant increase. A lot of that is due to new standards. There's new lease accounting, which is a big one. But I looked at the amount that they proposed it was gonna be, and it was actually less than some of the bids we got on a prior audit 4 years ago. So yeah, it is a increase, but if we went out to bid in the spring, it would have been a lot more, I feel. So I mean, I don't like having to pay more, but at this point, to get another auditing firm, and I talked to some people, to get another auditing firm would be difficult because of timing and being a first year client. They're not gonna want to take that on without a hefty price tag. So hopefully we're gonna be back in cycle next year and we will go out for a full bid early spring.
Okay. So this is going to exceed the provisions of the requirements for a bid. Are you putting us out the bid with the anticipation that we're only going to get one response and that's from King and King? I
No,
don't,
this could be a continuing service.
it can be. Okay.
Yeah, because we've used them in the past.
Okay.
And what is the amount, please?
The audit next year, I believe it was 64,500. It's about 20,000 more than we're paying now.
So do you anticipate having the paperwork for us to be able to motion that and vote that in at our next meeting? For
I would
engagement?
like to appoint them now, and then they'll send an engagement letter, which you guys will sign.
Okay.
Because I'm supposed to let the state know by May 31st, which I couldn't.
This
because
past
I
May
was-
31st. Okay.
So I'd like to at least try and get the appointment done so we can get that done with the state.
Mr. Chairman,
Gary?
how many years have we been with this firm?
4.
That's quite a long time without somebody else looking at the books.
That's why we usually do 4-year.
Yeah, I understand what you just said, and I guess at this point where we are right now, because of I've had this issue before in another town and we kept them too long. And you guys you have this policy. I know that the last time it went too long, they found inaccuracies, so. And I guess because we can't, because of our situation. I don't think we have much of a choice.
It's called a rock and a hard spot.
No, I mean, we're somewhat handcuffed in the timeline. The timeline really kind of set the tone on that, but you know, like Eric said, in listening to what he said earlier, that by August, we should be back on track. There's no reason why we shouldn't have plenty of time to go out to bid for services next year.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Eric.
Go ahead.
Eric, now that you're, over the hump with that, extended audit, King and King, they were taskmasters, obviously, but were they supportive? And did you feel good about the client relationship after you pulled yourself out of the problem that you were in?
Considering the situation, yeah, I think they were they worked with me quite well to get it resolved.
Thank you.
Certainly from my perspective, having, been chair with the previous auditor and then with King and King, they were far more communicative
Oh,
than the
yes.
previous firm was.
Yes.
That's for sure. So do we have somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion. Of the
Appoint King and King.
appoint
King Associates.
King
Associates.
Associates. For the next fiscal year,
for the fiscal year 24
from fiscal year 24.
Second,
Okay, any discussion?
What, I'm sorry, what was that number coming in at? For the contract?
64,500.
What was the budgeted amount?
Our portion 35,000, but it's split between us and the Board of Ed.
Equally?
No, more for us.
Are you able to see how that's broken out?
Yeah, I'll look back at the private.
Any other discussion? All in favor of appointing King and Associates?
I,
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 5, old business 5A, update and discussion on bonding projects.
Sewer project, they've started. I haven't gone by there. don't know
I
if
have.
anyone has.
They're building, they're moving.
Yeah, so that's good. So far, no concerns, no change orders, no nothing, so things are nice to see things progressing. The water bid, again, we split out the two bids. The bid is gonna be open on August 8th, I believe it's Thursday, yeah, August 8th for the water main project. CIF, DECD asked to, well, the engineers are working with them, they asked to push it out 2 weeks to make sure everything's vetted. So August 8th, that bid will be open, then hopefully soon after that, you'll see work start on that as the sewer project wraps up, so. I haven't seen a updated time frame for either project, but between the generator for the sewer and getting the water tank done, it won't be done till sometime next year anyway, but as long as we start getting the pipes in the ground now, that's the most important thing. Because development ain't gonna come overnight anyway, but if they see the pipes in the ground, at least that's gonna start driving people.
There's definitely construction going on there.
good, good. Finally,
Yeah.
Okay, any questions? Senior Center is wrapped up.
Still, gotta touch base with them again on the last $35,000.
That's for the generator, right, with USDA or whatever it was.
Yeah. And then for the additional items, I think the only thing that hasn't been done are the bollards. I think everything else has been, so I don't know where they're at, so I'll check on that.
Okay. Okay, moving on to item B, old business update from fire department and recreation budget subcommittees. I'll start with recreation.
recreation, when we talked to, Ryan with, the recreation department, we determined that it would make a lot more sense to have a full budget year to do comparisons and analysis with, so now that that's concluded, I'm hoping to talk to the two members that are on the committee, and set something up in September to start that.
With regard to fire department subcommittee, we've met once, we meet again on Thursday. Meeting, our first meeting, I think was a very productive meeting. We spent most of that time really kind of digging into a lot of the history, I guess, of the two departments and how everything has kind of come together up to present time. We had asked for some data to be able to analyze that to gotta figure out the best way forward and, we meet on Thursday. I don't have very much more I can share with you at this point, only because part of our agreement with those meetings was after the meeting, we can kind of share where we're at. So that way we can kind of keep everything contained. So we should, have quite a bit more info for you. I would think at our next meeting in August. Anything, Matt, that you want?
No, I think that says it all. I think next meeting, we'll probably have some more info after we, go through those numbers with the chiefs.
Item D, discussion of possible action.
No, see.
See, I knew I was missing something. I'm reading it. I'm like, man, I don't, yeah, okay. Update from Capital Improvement Planning Policy Subcommittee.
So we have not met yet. I believe it's Gary, Gail, and Rob. I talked to Jim Barney today about getting together to meet before. We'd like to do it before they get something kind of finalized before they start their budget deliberations. I did order a couple of books from GFOA on capital planning and policies, so I've been kind of going through those, going through some of the other examples that I had given you, and start to kind of get a rough draft of a policy. I'd like to have something kind of put together with just all the basics, and then when it comes to numbers and things, those are things we can discuss, so. In the next couple of weeks, I'm hoping maybe we can get together. I'm gonna send out an email probably later this week to poll everyone on when they're available, and we can start to, craft some kind of policy.
Okay, now we'll move on to item D, discussion and possible action on information received from ordinance committee regarding municipal building committee ordinance. So in your packet, you have a draft copy from the committee with regard to that audit. Also in your packet, you have the changes that we had submitted, or the items we had submitted for consideration as part of that ordinance. It had been requested that we keep this amongst ourselves for right now, because this is a draft ordinance. It is currently being worked on. And really our purpose for this review here tonight is really to only vet those items which we had requested they consider and look at how they were or were not incorporated into the ordinance, not to really dissect that ordinance draft as a whole.
Okay. I have a question, Mr. Chairman. On number 4, the sunset provision, would that vary depending on what type of project it was? Or would there be like an additional 30 or 60 or 90-day adder if we're waiting to hear from some sort of grant entity in Hartford? How did you envision that?
Well, I hadn't really envisioned it much. That was one of those, I guess, kind of fail safes that we had talked about of wanting to include, because we didn't want some of the other areas of the policy to be too restrictive in nature. I guess what I would like to do, if I can put you on the spot, Wayne, you are on ordinance, correct? Do you feel comfortable speaking to us with regard to this, or would you prefer not to? I don't want to.
Prefer not to.
Okay,
We can talk offline.
okay.
I believe we are having a meeting next week. That's what I will talk about. So if you've got any feedback, or you want to talk about something else,
Okay,
just send it to Rich.
Okay. okay.
The reason for the sunset, Mr. Chairman, is because of what we've had experienced in the past where it's gone on for so long and the increase of products became so much that because of the length of time, it went over what was budgeted.
Correct. That was the intent.
Yeah.
There are, however, as was pointed out, other factors that sometimes when you're dealing with federal monies and the hurdles that they make you go through, that it can't always be necessarily a hard number. So that was kind of the rub on that.
Well, I agree with the sunset. Only for what we've experienced in the past, there probably should be something that, it can be agreed on.
Right.
So that makes sense.
It's tricky. I mean,
State and all federal rules.
and it's tricky though, because all of a sudden you've gotta do research on, salamanders or whatever it is, and that throws a wrench in the works, and things are now dragged on for, 6 or 10 months longer than anticipated. And now you've kind of shot yourself in the foot based on the good intentions of not ending up in a similar predicament.
Mr. Chairman, I just had a couple notes on my copy. The first line of number 1 through 4, the word should be replaced by the word shall, I would recommend, which has legal significance on the fact that it's 100% required.
On R1 through 4, okay.
So you can see each sentence starts out with the word should.
Yep.
And that should be changed to shall. And then the last line in number 4. The language should say nullified and must go back to town meeting or referendum for new approval. It's saying the same thing, but
Right.
it has a requirement. I just don't know how, who sets the number of days or months in the sunset provision for each project? Is it set at the beginning of the project? Is it set by the Board of Selectmen or a combination of Board of Selectmen and people on the committee? Who is authorized to give an extension of that sunset provision? I think the ordinance needs to say that.
And I don't know if that's in here. I read it, and I don't see where that particular part is in here. I do see, I do see where everything else is is listed. But I did not see language for that, so that may not be
And
in here.
And just looking back historically at what Gary said on why we're even talking about this, I'm not certain it should be just the Board of Selectmen, because, historically, that's where the problem lie. And so maybe it needs to be a combination of the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance to make an extension of the sunset provision period, so that there's some attention being paid to why there's a delay, so that it's more upfront and on the table in front of everybody.
You guys have any thoughts, comments?
I guess I would have to agree with Gail on that, because we kind of wanted to make it so that it isn't any kind of political, try to make it foolproof, non-political. So that, the Board of Finance is every 6 years. Members stay on it for a longer length of time. I don't know if that could be put into it. But I agree that you don't want a project to become political football, and maybe something we could do to make that possible. Not possible.
Okay. Okay. I will, I'll get a hold of Rich. I think I'll have a phone call rather than an email.
Call in the morning.
In the morning? Oh, don't call in the morning, okay. All right,
Could we ask our board members who they think the department should be that enforces the ordinance?
yeah, that's fine. I mean, is that in
Wondering if
here?
That's within our scope.
We could make recommendations.
I don't know if that's already included in the draft.
Who is our enforcement now for ordinances?
It's a good question. Who is our enforcement now for ordinances? Just depend on the ordinance.
Well, the ordinance goes to town meeting, right? Or selected. Puts it forward and it goes to town meeting.
And once it gets approved, if there's a violation of that town ordinance, I guess, how does that get enforced?
That's a good question. I
For
haven't
the code,
looked at
that's
that yet.
fine.
I'm sorry.
You usually get a warning and then you get a fine.
Right,
And enforced by what department?
It's for select.
Board of Selectmen? And the Board of Selectmen puts out the letter, or is that done by someone else? Another department? I just wanted to know if there's any detail.
I think it's sent out by the town clerk, because the town clerk looks over the code, the town.
Oh,
So to collect the fine would be, they would owe it to the tax collector, or who would they, I'm just trying to figure out how it would work, just for my information.
I'd have to read through the code, see if it spells that out. I believe the town clerk would send a letter out.
Do we know if this has happened? I mean, fines have been paid before.
Tina, can you find that out for us?
Yep, I got it on my list.
All right,
Because
perfect.
I'm sorry, but I didn't.
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Someone go by department. If an ordinance fall under building official and issues penalty. Some of them are spelled out specifically.
Right.
Other general ones. Well, we've got a thing up in the air about enforcement. We don't have a person to serve people. You have to hire a marshal. You could have the marshal do the collection of the penalty. So please do that. In the past, you know, was on ordinance committee that would help. This would be enforcement person, you know, some places have constables and they use them, we don't have that. So,
But we don't have constables.
there's a trooper in the borough, but they're not gonna serve anything in the town.
So we actually.
Yeah, I don't see how we can have the board of selectmen be the enforcement agent in situations where the board of selectmen might be responsible for the delay or the deficiency. So how do we get around that? So we have a neutral party, no matter where the error or delay, is.
I will add that to my list for communication, but I think at the end of the day, that decision is gonna have to be drafted probably by the ordinance committee.
Exactly.
So,
And
I
it's gonna have
got
to
a
be
meeting
ratified.
with Tim Barney, we are currently going over, reviewing those ordinances. I will talk to him about it.
Okay.
And we'll take a look at the first body of the code, which covers a lot of this. So we'll talk to him on the back piece of that.
Okay, perfect. Okay, we're going to move on to item 6. Any other business? Anyone have any other business? Okay, I've just got one quick item. I don't know, last month's meeting, the meeting before, I don't even remember when, we talked about the public act that got passed that allows for the local boards of education to create a surplus account for up to 2% of whatever might be left over from their budget. The superintendent, the Board of Ed chair, and we sat down. I don't even remember now, a couple of weeks ago at all. It's all a big blur. But we sat down a couple of weeks ago and kind of threw some, threw some ideas out. They're gonna, obviously, as I mentioned before, this is their whole deal. This is their ball game. We just were, nice enough to have gotten invited to the party. Which I think is a good thing, because I think that there are opportunities for conspiracy theorists to twist things, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity for some misinformation to get put out there if it's not done right. I really kind of came in with only, three suggestions, or I guess three asks, as they draft their policy. The first one being that their board does not execute any transfers of monies until after that fiscal year audit is complete and the auditor is able to confirm what monies are actually left over. I think that's prudent. There are often variations, so I think that should be part of that process. The second item that I thought should be included in their policy was that, and I just kind of came up with an arbitrary dollar amount of, I said $5,000, per line item. That I don't think, let's put it out there. They're not sweeping hundreds of thousands of dollars, to begin with. They're smalls. And my thought was, any of these accounts that they swept that had $5,000 or more dollars left in that particular account, as part of our normal meeting process, when that were to happen or after it happened, that the superintendent reports back to the Board of Finance and says, okay, those particular accounts that had this much money in it that we swept, that was 5,000 or more, these were the accounts, and these are why those accounts had that much money or more in them. I think that that's important to know. I hate buzzwords. I hate words like transparency. It gets so overused, but in the interest of using that in transparency, I think it's important for us as as the budgetary authority that kind of decides, are we going to cut money? Aren't we going to cut money out of their budget? And for the voters that are going to vote, to say, okay, that makes sense. They had this much money and they had them in these accounts because of these anomalies, that it wasn't part of some grand conspiracy where they secreted away, $50,000 or $100,000 in these accounts that nobody knew about. And that's why they were able to sweep it. But they're able to say, look, we didn't anticipate this. This is what happened. We had this much money left over. Done. The third item on that, that somewhat relates to that, is when they decide what they're going to utilize that money for, that at the same time, the superintendent comes back and just says, just to let you know, out of that non-lapsing account, the Board of Ed decided to utilize X amount of dollars out of that account for the purchase of whatever, this particular expenditure. At the end of the day, it's going to be an account that we're going to know how much money is in it at any given time, because it's a normal account. Balances aren't going to be a secret, but I think at the same token, where that money is getting spent, I think is another thing that, will matter not only to us, but matter to the taxpayers to know where that money is going. And that was really I think the kind of three key points with respect to just kind of keeping us in the loop and abreast of what was going on, that I thought were the most important. That's all I got.
Mr. Chairman, but at the end of the day, we don't have any say.
This is 100%, their their deal and solely their
I just
deal.
wanted to
It's,
make sure.
yeah,
We
it
have
is.
no say on how they spend it.
This is just solely, like I said, I think that, we learned a long time ago that the more we communicate, usually the better things are and the less rumors go around. So I think this is kind of that same process, and it not only keeps us in the loop, but it keeps the community in the loop at the same time. I've had the opportunity this is a great board. I think that everybody here works very well together. Everybody doesn't have the same opinion, and some are, I would say that some opinions are diametrically, opposing of others on this board often at times. However, I've also been on there have been times when this board has been pretty contentious. And all I'm trying to do by making these suggestions is to try to account for that. The one thing we can't control is what the makeup of this board is gonna be 5 years from now or 7 years from now. And if things do a pivot and we get back into that kind of contentiousness again, I want to be able to make sure that, we've had enough input to try to alleviate and eliminate that from happening. And likewise, we've been part of, quite a few budget years where it's taken, multiple referendums to get a budget passed when the increase was, 0.5% or, or whatnot. And, or in the case of the Board of Ed budget, the Board of Ed might have been a, 0.1% or something, and it took 3 referendums. So, I think that having this information at everybody's fingertips is also kind of key to trying to, do our best to prevent that from happening again in the future as well.
Mr. Chairman, and I think your intentions are great, and the transparency will be best for both boards. And if your recommendations are taken by the Board of Education, I think it'll go quite a ways in giving the people that vote for the budget more confidence that we are actually being transparent. And that is important. I'm sorry to say that they want to know that we know what's going on, and I think that's a good thing.
During your discussion, did you discuss how this might help or hurt our future budgeting? That budget number that on the Board of Ed budget, if in fact it goes up to a certain amount, it increases a certain level that you have to hit. I can't remember what it's
So about
called.
the MBR,
MBR, yeah. It would seem to me that if we have a sweep account mechanism, that it can sort of smooth out the crisis budgetary items so that maybe we can keep the MBR lower. But am I misreading this? Is this something that it has no impact on the MBR?
I don't, it's interesting because, it's interesting because when you look at that public act, it doesn't tell you really anything. It has zero information at all. And I think at one point that was one of the questions that when we talked, I think I asked the same question, does this non-lapsing account count towards,
Next
the
year's
MBR and the overall budgetary number? In my head, it would make sense that it doesn't, that it kind of sits outside of that, but I don't know. And I don't know if you've received any more information on any of that.
They don't clearly say that, but generally speaking, your MBR is your minimum budget requirement based on years before.
Right.
So that doesn't play into it because it's already part of it.
Right.
It's already been taken into
It's already in
consideration.
consideration.
Is there a way we can you can get clarification on?
There's a couple of workshops that some of us are attending to learn more before we go back. No, it's there. Some of the board members are taking workshops. I'm taking a workshop and the organization. And we haven't even discussed it as a board yet. The board knew that we were talking to Scott. Yeah.
Yeah, they do, we're talking to Scott.
Yeah. I think the way that we left it too was as their board, really kind of digs in it and begins to craft policy. Whenever that is, as it kind of, you start to see that light at the end of the tunnel, I'll have another meeting with the three of them and not that it matters, just kind of a quick once over, maybe to just kind of make sure that, that other framework is kind of
It's
there.
gonna be interesting how it evolves.
Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. Public forum, anyone wish to speak? Mary Beth?
Mary Beth Mail on 11 Pequot Trail. The only thing I want to know is, could the Board of Finance reconsider on this funding of the protective glass to go with bulletproof glass? I feel that though everybody in the town hall are very important to the town, the workers. That tax collector, I've heard from other tax collectors, the abuse they take, there's times they are scared. I've heard a couple stories from Winona, but I just think you're talking, I don't know, was it 6,500 up to 25,000 for bulletproof? I think the extra, how do you put a price tag on 3 to 4 people that are working down that line all the way to the assessor's office? How do you say you're not worth this extra $19,000? And if someone's coming in with a gun, they're gonna be faster than they can get behind that counter. So that's my concern. I feel that they're very valuable, and I think we owe it to our people to provide the utmost safety here for them. That's all.
Just one comment, I agree the safety is important. And if it was gonna spend that much money, I think an overall on how safe the entire section is, just not the bulletproof glass. If we were gonna spend that much money, there would have to probably be a more intense look at, okay, is there a door they can just push in and go in there? I mean,
That would be, yeah, I don't know. I'm
That's-
just saying could you reconsider? My feeling is they're valuable as everybody is in their workplace, and they need to have that safety and comfort level. And I think going with bulletproof glass is personally the way to go, but obviously you make the appropriations and you made the motion.
So procedurally, you know me, I don't ever respond back to public comment. I never do.
You're not supposed to.
But I will say this, I think that you bring up a good, point, and we did hear that earlier. And I don't want to go down a rabbit hole during, public comment, because I'm probably doing something I'm not supposed to.
You do, but
20 grand, is 20 grand town meeting?
If it's an appropriation out of the regular budget, but you could use the low funds or the capital non-recurring unassigned funds.
So with other people being in this room, one of who is the first selectman, if they feel that they need to re-examine that or reconsider that for whatever reason, then I would expect that we would see it at our next meeting. If they're comfortable with the decision that they made, then
it was just
that it will kind of stay on track.
with the
So,
way society is
Sure.
now and the climate of everybody, you don't know. You don't know.
right.
I mean, I work right down in downtown Dayton, so there's tons of things, let's just lock the door at times. Gail, I'm right across the street from you, and you don't know who's coming.
Our doors are still locked.
I guess you could say that with all of them. I mean,
Everywhere.
The first selectman's office.
Absolutely.
The
The
treasurer's
finance
office.
office, everybody's office.
So-
So it's something that we may have to look at down the road. But especially, Leona's collecting a lot, whether it's cash, whether it's checks, whether it's credit cards, I don't know what she's doing. And that's not for me to know, but, I just know from other towns, there's been issues with irate, and I've heard that people are irate with our mill rate increase. But that's just me personally, but whatever you do, you should do.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
So I understand the safety point that we're talking about, but I think there has to be an analysis. You go with the bulletproof glass, you have many weaknesses there besides that area. Cabinets, walls. It's where do you stop? I mean, you can do what you see, but there's a lot of other weaknesses in that area that can be brought forward, so. maybe you want to step back and. look at the whole-
Sure.
That's what I-
Yep.
the whole thing.
Yep.
You know, it just. I have to do a little further step back. and look forward.
No, good point.
Maybe if they bought it.
I mean, at the end of the day, we just have to figure out how to come up with the money. We've got maybe the easier job. Wayne,
You might want to take a look, see if maybe there's grants available for safety. Public buildings. That might be an avenue to take a look at. I learned a lot today about grants. So, I think there might be something out there. I know there's a lot for emergency services out there, so. Be an avenue. Now, of course, I'm a lot of people on trail.
Did we put a grant writer in the budget?
5,000.
anyone else wish to speak? Okay, we're gonna go on to the last one, adjournment. We have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Good night.
Tom, you're on the recreation, right? Is there a week in August that is open for you, or should we look